Hello YouTube, how's it going? This is the crossover and I'm back with another video. Today I'm very excited to be doing my first mock draft for the 2022 NBA draft class. I decided to do my first mock draft during All-Star weekend since as of the recording of this video, it is Sunday night. Steph Curry just won the All-Star game MVP for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. There is going to be no NBA play, therefore the record all NBA teams' records are going to stay the same for the next 3 days, so I wanted to get out my first mock draft now. Just a quick disclaimer, I am going to be going through all 30 picks. However, I am going to be splitting it up into two videos as I do recognize that I do talk a lot. Uh, whether it is a good thing or bad thing, you guys let me know in the comments. But I decided to split, the first 15 picks into one video and the picks 16 through 30 into another video. So just a disclaimer that, at the end of the video, at the end of the 15th pick, there is going to be, the normal outro. It's just gonna cut off and then it's just gonna pick up in part two, which will release the day after this video, part one. So today's video is going to be the first 15 picks in this draft. So without any further delay, let's get straight into the video. Moving on to the first pick in the 2022 NBA draft, I have the Orlando Magic selecting Gonzaga big Chet Holmgren, who I believe to be the best player in this draft. Taking a look at where Orlando is in their rebuild, at this point in their rebuild, they just have to be worrying about taking the best player available as they have the first pick in the draft for a reason. And I believe that to be Chet Holmgren over the past month or so, he has dominated college basketball, really unlike any other player. Earlier on in the season, I had him, really pegged in as the third best prospect in this class, right behind Paolo and Jabari Smith. However, again, as I stated over the past month, he's been just incredible. His ability to score inside and outside, be a very efficient three-point shooter, be a very efficient roll man, his passing game in both the half court and transition, being able to hit cutters. He can handle the ball a little bit in transition, really dominating as a rim protector. His timing, his poise around the rim is incredible. One of the best rim protectors, one of the best rim protecting prospects I've seen. And he's also shown an ability to handle himself out on the perimeter very well. And there's room to believe that he can continue to grow. And what I really love about Chet is that he's shown between FIBA and his play this season at Gonzaga that he can play multiple different roles. This season with Gonzaga, given the fact that Drew Timme is really a post-oriented player, Chet Holmgren has had to play much more on the perimeter, which it took him a bit to get used to in the beginning of the season. However, again, as I stated over the past month, he's really caught on fire. And in FIBA play, he was asked to play much more as a traditional big, more so play around the basket. He was still, out on the perimeter doing his thing, but just not as often. He was really, dominating inside. And he also played alongside Kenneth Lofton, who's a very solid, mid-major player in his own right. So I believe Chet Holmgren will slide into this team. I also think that Mo Bamba is gone. I don't think Orlando should bring him back, pay him what he will probably be asking. I expect a team like Detroit to offer him, a good amount of money. So I expect Chet Holmgren to slide into the starting five for the Orlando Magic from day one. I expect Wendell Carter Jr. to slide over to the four. I believe that they can both play off of each other. Two very versatile, high IQ, mobile bigs, really, that both of them do a very good job of protecting the paint as well. And I think that it would really take the Orlando Magic defense to new levels. They haven't been bad at protecting the rim per se this year. However, I believe, Chet Holmgren's ceiling defensively is just going to elevate this team to another level. He'd be playing alongside Jalen Suggs, his childhood friend. And I believe that having a big who can both space the floor efficiently and be as creative of a passer as Chet Holmgren is only going to help players like Jalen Suggs. I believe that their chemistry is going to be unbelievable from day one. He's only going to help their game. He's also going to help a player like Cole Anthony, who I don't feel like is the best playmaker. So having a big out there like Chet Holmgren who can play make, especially in the half court, as I stated, being able to hit them off cuts, off backdoor screens, and whatnot is going to be very efficient for their game moving forward. And as I stated before, Chet Holmgren is just the best player in the board, so you just take the best player and you keep it moving. So with the first pick in the draft, again, I have the Orlando Magic selecting Chet Holmgren. Moving on to the second pick in the 2022 NBA draft, I have the Detroit Pistons selecting Jabari Smith, the forward out of Auburn. Similarly to the Orlando pick, I just believe Jabari Smith to be the best player on the board, given his two-way upside and just his ability to be a self self-creator as a jump shooter, as well as just a player that's going to be able to space the floor efficiently. I believe his fit with Cade Cunningham is going to be seamless if this does happen. In real life, this is as perfect of a 1-2 punch as you can really hope for. Cade being the playmaker that he is, and Jabari Smith being the pick and pop threat that he is. It's just going to be beautiful to watch. And I also believe that Jabari Smith will automatically slide in, given his shot making ability at his 6'10" size, and how polished he is of a creator, his ability to just pull up from behind the line, his jab step moves and whatnot. He's just a very polished scorer for his age, and I believe that he will automatically come in and become the second option for this Detroit Pistons team. And that would ultimately slide Saddiq Bey to being a third option, which I feel like is much better suited for him. Barring the fact that I believe that Jeremy Grant will be traded in the offseason. So I am assuming that if he is still on the team, I think Jabari Smith would ultimately would be a third option. But regardless if he is, I think Jabari Smith will be the second option on this team. And, again, his ability to create his own shot, taking pressure off of Cade and Saddiq Bey. And I also believe he can also help Killian Hayes' development. I don't think much of Killian Hayes, but, I think Jabari Smith's ability to be a very viable pick and pop threat and space and be able to space, and his ability, to space the floor from day one can help Killian in his development as well. I also really like his defensive impact for this team. He's very good at weak side defender. And he's a very tenacious defender, very solid on ball as well. Strength is a bit of an issue, but again, as I mentioned, just his attitude and the aggression that he plays with on the defensive end is just something that this Detroit Pistons team just doesn't really have. So I believe that he'll be a great fit for this Pistons team overall on both sides of the floor. And once again, he's just the best player on the board. So again, with the second pick in the 2022 NBA draft, I have the Detroit Pistons selecting Jabari Smith. Moving on to the third pick in the 2022 NBA draft, I have the Houston Rockets selecting Duke forward Paolo Banchero, who once again I just believe to be the best player on the draft. I feel like the top three in this class is kind of locked in. I think Jaden Ivey has the most potential out of the players on the rest of the class to break into the top three. However, for me personally, it's pretty solidified, and I feel like Paolo Banchero, depending on how Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. develop next season, could easily step into Houston next year and be their best player, especially on the offensive side of the floor. The three-level scorer upside that Paolo Banchero brings is just so enticing. His ability to power his way to the rim is very tantalizing. I also believe that he's shown the potential of being a mid-range scorer and as well as a three-point shooter, a three-point creator for himself. He has a very very solid handle. However, it does need some work. However, just his ability to be a three-level scorer at 6'10", 250 pounds is very enticing. I think he could play off of Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. well. He likes to operate around the mid post quite a bit, and I feel like him having the ball in his hands will allow Steven Silas to use Jalen Green as a cutter, which I feel like those two could have great synergy together as Paolo Banchero does a great job of not only attacking but drawing attention from the defense and either finding cutters or his Mark Williams for layups, and I feel like that could easily translate to Houston, and I feel like him and Jalen Green could really play off of each other. And again, as I just stated, I just feel like he would come into Houston, automatically, in my opinion, be their best prospect. I think he's a better prospect than Jalen Green. There could be some issues on the defensive side of the floor. I don't think Paolo Banchero is a bad defender by any means, but he's not the best of defenders. With having your two cornerstones and Paolo and Jalen Green both being pretty iffy defenders, that could be a question mark. However, given the fact that they have other first round picks that I will hope to address those defensive needs later, and they also have a player in Usman Garuba who I really like, who really doesn't get too much playing time for Houston, who was a very solid defensive prospect last year. I feel like their defense is something that they could worry about later. If their player like Paolo Banchero is on the board with the third pick, I feel like Houston should nab him, and they'll have their 1-2 punch moving forward as they continue along their rebuild. Moving on to the fourth pick in the 2022 NBA draft, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder selecting Duke wing AJ Griffin Jr. Now, I want to start off by saying that although AJ Griffin wasn't necessarily the best player, I'm going to be honest, he was the fifth best player on my board. I have Jaden Ivey as the fourth best player on my board. However, selecting another ball handler when Oklahoma City already has the likes of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Josh Giddey, and I'm a very big fan of Tre Mann. I just didn't feel like adding a fourth ball handler to that mix would, really be productive. I kind of feel like Oklahoma City already kind of has, their ball handlers of the future already on the team. So I elected to go with my fifth best prospect, and that would be AJ Griffin. Definitely not a bad decision. A player who was highly touted coming out of high school and has kind of played in much more of a role player role in Duke, really been relegated to more so of a 3-and-D role. And he's really thrived in that role, despite the injury concerns. He's come back for Duke this season and has been an extremely efficient shooter. He's shown the ability to attack off closeouts, has a very polished handle. He's a 6'6" athlete, very fast for his height, with a 7-foot wingspan, a great athlete with the level of polish and poison IQ that AJ Griffin has shown, while still only being 18 years old. He only has more room to continue to grow. And I feel like he would plug in very well next to Josh Giddey and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I feel like he is the best defender out of the three. I feel like he can cover, 1 through 3 pretty efficiently at the NBA level. I feel like threes, because of how strong and athletic he is, and one's just given how quick he is. And I feel like he'll be able to space the floor very efficiently for both of those ball handlers. And, as I stated before, with the polish that he has shown already with his handle, and he has shown flashes of being able to, take over games. And I wouldn't even say really flashes. He can take over games when he has to. And that's what I really like about AJ Griffin, is that even though this is more so of a fit pick rather than a best player available, a BPA pick, I feel like AJ Griffin is just such a seamless fit, and he only has room to grow. And when Josh Giddey or Shai or Tre Mann aren't on, AJ Griffin can kind of take the reins and continue and get going and score. And I feel like he has shown the upside of being a three-level scorer. And as I mentioned in my last bullet, he's an athlete, and Sam Presti sure does love his athletes. So I feel that, rolling out a lineup of 6'5", 6'6" Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 6'8" Josh Giddey, and then 6'5", 6'6" AJ Griffin, all three players who are, pretty versatile offensively and defensively. Although Shai and Josh Giddey aren't the best of defenders, they are very tall. So it's a very modern lineup. And once again, I don't feel that AJ Griffin is necessarily the best player on the board, but he is the best fit for Oklahoma City Thunder, and he's also an awesome prospect in his own right. So with the fourth pick in the draft, I do have the Oklahoma City Thunder selecting AJ Griffin. Moving on to the fifth pick in the 2022 NBA draft, I have the Indiana Pacers selecting Purdue guard Jaden Ivey. And I just really love this pick. I love this fit. Jaden Ivey is just the most electric, exciting prospect that the Indiana Pacers, would have drafted since, I don't know, Paul George, maybe George McLeod, back in the day. It's just such a beautiful fit. Indiana is just such a, let's be honest here, it's a relatively dull market. It's a small market, small medium market, in the land throughout the landscape of the NBA. A team that can't really afford to, sign big name free agents. They're always just trying to be competitive in order to, not lose, the tickets that they already do sell. And, you'd be drafting such an electric and exciting prospect like Jaden Ivey, just such a beautiful fit, in terms of, ticket sales and whatnot. But on the court, it's an even better fit. The Indiana Pacers recently acquired young Tyrese Halliburton through that heist of a trade at the deadline. We will talk about the Kings later, but it's just such a beautiful fit. Tyrese Halliburton, only in his second year at 21 years old, being one of the best on-ball shooters in the league from behind the arc, and as well as I believe he ranks 11th in assists. And it's such a beautiful fit with Jaden Ivey, who Jaden Ivey's main strength, in my opinion, is his ability to attack the rim, put pressure on defenses, and not only being able to finish around the rim, but being able to he does such a great job of being able to locate shooters, while he's attacking the basket and putting pressure on the defense. And that's just, again, such a beautiful fit with Tyrese Halliburton. Tyrese Halliburton more so handle, outside, be that outside scorer, while Jaden Ivey will, be that player to put pressure on the defense. He would work wonders, with a player like Isaiah Jackson, a very athletic big who would, thrive next to a player like Jaden Ivey who can put pressure on the defense, kind of attract defenders, and he can just finish lobs and whatnot. And I think it'd also be great for a player like Chris Duarte, a player, Jaden Ivey being able to put pressure on the rim, being able to free up open shots, for Chris Duarte, potentially even Miles Turner if he's still on the roster, and even Malcolm Brogdon if he is on the roster. But this is just such a beautiful fit offensively, and just having Tyrese Halliburton and Jaden Ivey as a backcourt, my God, that's just an awesome backcourt, for this Indiana Pacers team, who, as I stated, is just a very has been a very boring team for the past couple of years, and this would definitely give them that jolt of excitement, kind of similar to what John Morant kind of brought to the Grizzlies. I feel like Jaden Ivey would bring a little bit of that to the Indiana Pacers, and although he does have some issues defensively, I do feel that his awareness and just his overall IQ needs a lot of work. I think just the offensive upside of having a backcourt of Jaden Ivey and Tyrese Halliburton is just too good to pass up. So with the fifth pick in the draft, I have the Indiana Pacers selecting Jaden Ivey. Moving on to the sixth pick in the 2022 NBA draft, I have the Sacramento Kings selecting Kentucky guard Shaedon Sharpe. Now, this was a pick that I was pretty conflicted with. Shaedon Sharpe, for those of you that don't know, was one of the most highly touted high school players, was committed to Kentucky for next year. However, he decided to reclassify and enter this class. He's been at Kentucky, but he hasn't been playing. John Calipari has already come out and stated that, Shaedon and his family have already decided that he will be playing for Kentucky next season. However, his name is still in, it is still in for the 2022 draft. So I believe that, although it's pretty hard to, really judge him, given the fact that, we haven't seen him play college ball, what he has displayed, throughout his high school career. He kind of dominated the EYBL, led them in scoring. He's a 6'6", strong, powerful guard, super athletic, who was a 3-level scorer, and the EYBL, as I stated, led them in scoring, is a very special, athletic prospect, as well as just a very skilled prospect. And if he decides to keep his name, in this year's draft, I believe that this is the proper pick. I believe that, even if he did play, I believe there is potential that he would be higher. But just because we haven't seen him, I can't really put him any higher than sixth. And more so as a team fit, I do believe that Sacramento does have a hole long term now at the shooting guard position. I'm not a big Davion Mitchell fan, and I feel like, given the fact that they are, very stupidly going forward with this De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis core as they chase, the 10th seed. The Sacramento is okay with being, a perennial 10th seed, but I guess when you're as bad of a franchise as Sacramento, that's the best you can get. I will never forgive them for trading Tyrese Halliburton. However, that's a conversation for another day. Dante DiVincenzo has been relatively, bad this season. So I believe Shaedon Sharpe would slide into that shooting guard spot. De'Aaron Fox isn't necessarily a half court, the best of half court creators. He's been better as of, the past couple weeks, really after the trade deadline. He's been, really well, that two-man game with Sabonis. However, I do believe that Shaedon Sharpe could come in from day one, potentially be able to space the floor, to allow, Domantas Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox's two-man game to work. And I feel like, both of those players aren't necessarily, number one options on, playoff teams. So I think Shaedon Sharpe could come in and have upside for that. And, we haven't necessarily, I didn't think he was a bad defender at times in high school. I think, he did fall asleep occasionally. But, it's just a shame that we don't have any, college film on him to, really be able to judge him. But, given his physical tools, I guess you have to give him the benefit of the doubt. But he did fall asleep a fair amount, and he's just a relative unknown. But given his athletic profile and his three-level scoring upside, I felt that this was an adequate pick for the reeling Sacramento Kings. Moving on to the seventh pick in the 2022 NBA draft, I have the Portland Trailblazers selecting Arizona wing Benedict Mathurin, a 6'6" wing, very long with a plus wingspan, solid athlete, who I think would slide in for this Portland team as their long-term two next to Anthony Simons. I do believe Damian Lillard will be traded sooner rather than later, and I feel like he's a perfect fit next to Anthony Simons since he is a great point of attack defender, with his length. And just his overall instincts. He's a very disciplined defender on ball as well. As I just stated, he uses predominantly his length to really kind of overwhelm, perimeter players. And I feel like, Anthony Simons is a pretty bad defender, and I feel like Benedict Mathurin will kind of, help cover, that aspect of Anthony Simons' game, as I do believe Anthony Simons is the cornerstone for this Portland Trailblazers team moving forward. And he's not just a point of attack defender. He can do a lot more than that. As I stated before, he's really leading this Arizona. He's the leading scorer for a top three team in the nation. He's shown a great ability of being able to be a very effective spot up shooter, so he can kind of play off Anthony Simons. But he's also shown a lot in terms of being an on ball scorer. I do feel like his finishing does need some work, specifically with his offhand. However, being the progress that he has taken from his freshman to sophomore year as an on ball scorer is very encouraging. And I do believe that he will not only play off of Anthony Simons, but he can dominate the ball a little bit and create some of his own shots. And I do believe that as he continues to develop, that linear progression from his freshman year to his sophomore year is very encouraging. I do believe that will carry over to the NBA. So overall, Benedict Mathurin is just a very solid player. And I would also like to mention that he also is a very solid cutter who would also help take Anthony Simons' passing game to not necessarily another level, but he would also be another weapon in the for Anthony Simons to utilize as a cutter. And I also more so I really love this fit also on the defensive side of the floor. As I stated, just because Chauncey Billups is a very aggressive coach in terms of his defensive scheme. He likes to switch a lot, press up on defenders. And although I did state in a previous video that it's not a great fit, the personnel on the team right now with Chauncey Billups' scheme, I do believe that his scheme is much more modern compared. I do believe that the problem with Portland is more so the players rather than the scheme, and I do believe that giving Chauncey Billups a long rangy wing who's an excellent point of attack defender it's just a perfect fit. So with the 7th pick in the draft, I have the Portland Trailblazers selecting Benedict Mathurin. Moving on to the 8th pick in the 2022 NBA draft, I have the San Antonio Spurs selecting Wisconsin guard Johnny Davis. Now, in my opinion, Johnny Davis is the best player currently on the board, and I also believe him to be the best offensive player on the board. Maybe I believe him to be in the discussion with a couple other wings that we'll talk about later. But I feel like Johnny Davis is not only a great fit with this San Antonio team, but I feel like he fills a great need, which is this team just doesn't have a lot of scoring. Watching San Antonio games can be kind of rough at times just because they can't really get anything going offensively. I like a player like Lonnie Walker, but he's just incredibly inefficient. I predicted that he would take a jump this year. He hasn't. Even a player like DeJounte Murray, he's just a limited 3-point shooter. So, there's just so much of an impact he can have offensively, despite him being an all-star. But, I feel like Johnny Davis would come in from day one, and he could arguably be the best scorer on this team from day one. A very polished, 3-level scorer. He gets to his spots at will. Doesn't have the best of handle. Does have some issues athletic wise. We'll talk about that in a second. But just he's able to get to his spots at will. Deadly mid-range scorer, especially in that mid post. Likes to get defenders on his back and kind of fade away. His 3-point shot is very solid, especially off ball. On ball, I do have some concerns with some of his mechanics, and he does have a bit of a low release, but overall I do feel like there's if this pick does actually happen, I feel like there's a very good chance that he could come into San Antonio and legitimately be their best scorer from day one. It still has room to grow, as I stated, with his handle and whatnot, as he is only a sophomore in college. And defensively, he's also a very solid defender as well. Very high IQ defender, very disciplined defender. He's also a very strong defender as well. When Wisconsin did play Purdue, he kind of put Jaden Ivey in jail whenever he was guarding him. However, there were times where he does get beat. As I stated, that his lack of high upside athleticism does come back to bite him in certain instances. However, as I stated in my last bullet point, San Antonio having players like DeJounte Murray, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, just long rangy athletes. I think they can make up for Johnny Davis's athletic, deficiencies. And he's a very solid defender in his own right. So, you'd be having a lineup of plus defenders in DeJounte Murray, Johnny Davis, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, and even Jakob Poeltl at the 5, who I think is a very underrated center in this league. So I feel like Johnny Davis is not only the best player on the board, arguably the best scorer on the board. I feel like he would come in again, be arguably San Antonio's number one option from day one, and also fit into their defense, giving San Antonio and Greg Popovich, if he is going to coach next year, another plus defender to add to their already stout defense. Moving on to the ninth pick in the 2022 NBA draft, I have my New York Knicks selecting Ty Washington Jr., the point guard out of Kentucky. Ty Washington is one of my favorite prospects in this class. I think he's head and shoulders the best point guard in this class. Uh, Point guard, I use the term a bit loosely. I think if Jaden Ivey continues to take steps as a pick and roll playmaker, then I think he will eventually be a point guard. But as of the making, as of right now, Ty Washington is the best point guard in the class. And my Knicks, we suck. I kind of called it in my season predictions that Randall would decline. His historic increase in shooting percentages just wasn't going to hold up over the course of multiple seasons. I don't really like RJ Barrett as a player. I think he's maybe the fourth, maybe fifth option. More realistically, the fifth option, a really good starter on a team, but don't let Knicks fans hear that because they all think RJ Barrett is the second coming. I really didn't like the Obi Toppin pick. The point guard position has been a hole on our roster for decades now, and we took a 6'8" roll man over the likes of players like Tyrese Halliburton, Cole Anthony, and Tyrese Maxey. But finally with this pick, I have the Knicks, once and for all, filling the point guard position with the best point guard on not only on the board, but the best player on the board, in my opinion, and the best point guard in the class. What I really love about Ty Washington Jr. is just his poise and the pace that he plays with. He's just so controlled. So he's always in his own element. He's never rattled no matter what defense is thrown at him, whether that be, a press, a zone, an aggressive man coverage, speaking like this is the NFL, a man scheme. But and what I really just love about him is his playmaking and just this delivery on his passes. He could really make every pass out the book. Very patient, very very solid, pick and roll ball handler, and the delivery on his pass is just beautiful. Every pass that he makes, it just seems like it's just perfect. Whether he has to throw a bullet pass, it seems like he just puts just enough force on it to get it to where it needs to be, or whether it's just a flow pass and he puts it right where his teammates need the ball. Just such a high IQ, smart player who I think has shown flashes as being a legitimate on ball creator. I do have a bit of gripes with his form. I feel like his guide hand kind of flares out a little bit on his shot, but the rest of his, what I really love about Ty Washington's shooting specifically is that even if his guide hand does flare out, his form is just very consistent in everything he does. A lot of the prospects in this class, or I think it's more so just a player thing. At this age, that players, their forms are can be inconsistent. Depending on where they're shooting the ball from, but that's not the case with Ty Washington. His form is just consistent from everywhere on the court, and he's almost a 50% from the field, 40% from behind the arc player. So he's a very efficient player. So I feel like even if the guy hand does flare out, I feel like he can make it work. And I feel like, again, he's shown legitimate upside of being an on-ball creator, and I feel like he could play off, the likes of RJ Barrett or Julius Randle, as depressing as that is. But, I feel like he would be able to not only defer to those guys and be able to get them the ball in situations where they like the ball. I feel like him and Obi Toppin, even though I hate Obi Toppin as a player, I feel like him and Obi Toppin can have some synergy, and potentially even Mitchell Robinson, very much Mitchell Robinson if he is on the Knicks next season. And I feel like Ty Washington would also be able to take over and score when he needs to. So, the Knicks would have a lineup of Ty Washington, and RJ Barrett being their backcourt moving forward. You still have guys like Quentin Grimes. And even though I do love guys like Miles McBride and I really like a player like Jokic Jokubaitis, it's just, we need a blue chip point guard prospect. And I feel like Ty Washington would give us that. And he's the best. Not only is that, but he's the best player on the board at this point in the draft. 6'3" point guard with 6'9" wingspan. Great height. I feel like he's also a pretty solid on-ball defender, especially in pick and roll situations. He does have a bit of Matisse Thybulle in him, where he kind of likes to, let the guard get in front of him in pick and roll situations, and he likes to kind of like hover behind them and then contest a shot from behind. Does need some work as a help defender, but I feel like that will improve as time goes on, just given his IQ and just his athletic profile. 6'3", 6'4" with a 6'9" wingspan. Just there's not a lot to not like about Ty Washington, and not only does he fill a dire position of need for my Knicks, but he's the best player on the board, and he plays for Kentucky, and we have Julius Randle, Emmanuel Quickly, we have Kenny Payne, on the coaching staff, we have Nerlens Noel, so another Kentucky player, another Kentucky Wildcat for my New York Knicks. Moving on to the 10th pick in the 2022 NBA draft, With their second selection, I have the Portland Trailblazers selecting LSU forward Tari Eason. Now, Eason is a very divisive prospect. I've seen a lot of people have him all over the place. I've seen some people have him as a lottery talent, mid first round talent, and even end of the first round talent. However, for me, I really love Tari Eason as a prospect. I really value his two-way ability as a 6'8" wing, a very athletic six eight wing who has, as I say, legitimate self-creation upside. His handle for his height is very advanced. He has a variety of different moves that he can get to, and I feel like as the season has gone on, he's only gotten better and better and better. As this is his second year in college, he was a transfer from Cincinnati. He transferred from Cincinnati to LSU. He's been killing it for LSU this season, even though LSU has been kind of up and down this year. He's been without a doubt their best player, really their only source of offense, as their whole entire team outside of Tari Eason is just a bunch of raw athletes. But Tari Eason just has a variety of different moves that he can get to, a variety of different crossovers that he can put together, and he has a lot of different reaction moves, which is very, very, very encouraging for a player that you can see is continually growing and growing and growing, and is a player that, as I mentioned in his individual scouting report, it feels like when you watch Tari Eason, it kind of like he's just adapting to the competition every single game. It's just like if he gets stopped or the ball gets plucked from him, he'll just adapt and he'll just hit the defender the next play with just a different move, and that's just really awesome to see. And he's just such a good defender, awesome strong side defender. Really likes to use his length to bother ball handlers that attack his side. He's shown flashes of being a weak side rim protector. He's just a very solid on ball defender as well. Very disciplined, likes to keep his hands out wide. And as I mentioned with the other Portland pick, Benedict Mathurin, his length is just very overwhelming for a lot of ball handlers. He really put guys like Javon Quinterly and Keon Ellis when they played Alabama in jail. And again, as I mentioned with Benedict Mathurin, I think it's a perfect fit. A guy who has legitimate self-creation upside. I think he's going to be a solid floor spacer at the NBA level. Might struggle a bit from day one, and might take some time getting adjusted to the NBA pace and the NBA game. But I feel like Tari Eason is just going to continue to develop, and I really like his potential as a guy who can create for himself as well as space the floor and be a very long, disruptive defender. And as I mentioned with the Benedict Mathurin pick again, my rationale with these picks for Portland is just Anthony Simons is just more of the same player of like that CJ Dame ilk, where he's just an awesome offensive player but a poor defensive player. And I feel like next to Anthony Simons, I feel like he's gonna have to have plus wing defenders, and I feel like Damon CJ never had that. So you know what I'm saying? Screw all of that. I'm gonna give Anthony Simons all the wings in the world. And I feel like again with Chauncey Billups' scheme of just being very fast paced, switching defense, very aggressive, man defense. Tari Eason would fit perfectly into that. Being able to switch multiple positions, be able to annoy, pester ball defenders with his length. I feel like it's just another perfect fit, and I feel like he would be slide into the long term for Portland. Yes, he can play a little bit big himself, and he's very aggressive on the boards as well. So again, Portland, with ending this draft, ending their first round selections with two wings to complement their young star and Anthony Simons, two long, very good point of attack defenders who both have upside as not only creators for themselves but just being able to space the floor. So I love this pick for Portland, and so ultimately I have the Portland Trail Blazers with their second selection in the lottery, taking Tari Eason. Moving on to the 11th pick in the 2022 NBA draft, I have the Memphis Grizzlies selecting Nikola Jovic, a wing from Serbia. Now, he's a very interesting prospect. I know a lot of people have him going in the mid first round or early 20s. However, I just think Nikola Jovic is just such a special offensive prospect. His not necessarily high end athleticism, but just how quick and agile he is at being 6'10", and just how skilled of a creator and a playmaker and a scorer he is at that height. And again, just given how nimble he is, I think he's just a very, very unique, very special prospect. And my rationale behind this is that Memphis doesn't necessarily have any true second option. Desmond Bane is a very good player. He is averaging 20 points, but I don't necessarily think that he's that second offensive star next to Ja, right? And I don't believe Jaren Jackson will turn into that either. I'm not a Dylan Brooks fan. So my logic with this is that I feel like Nikola Jovic just has the highest offensive ceiling of any player left on the board at this point. I feel like he does have certain defensive, struggles. I feel like his lateral quickness is a bit lacking, and just his overall defensive IQ just isn't there. He falls asleep a bit often. But just given the fact that Memphis is, they're a top 10 defense this year, he'd be playing next to Jaren Jackson Jr. I think Nikola Jovic is a four. He can't play the three, but I think he's really a four. And I think Jaren Jackson, with the weight that he's put on, I think he could be a full-time five next season. And I feel like Nikola Jovic, playing next to Jaren Jackson, Desmond Bane isn't a bad defender, and slide in whoever you want at the three, whether it be Zaire Williams. Hopefully he takes a step next season. Hasn't been terrible this year. Or a player like Dylan Brooks, who's, I think he's a bit overrated defender. He just fouls the crap out of everybody, but he's not a bad defender. I feel like Memphis is a solid enough defensive team to make up for Nikola Jovic's weaknesses defensively, and just having a 6'10" wing with the handle that Nikola Jovic has, the shot making that he has, being able to space the floor, and just his playmaking upside, and not only the half court, which as I mentioned, just having a 6'10" playmaker like Nikola Jovic just allows you to do so much with your offense. You can run pick and rolls with Jovic as the ball handler and Ja as the screen setter. You can run a Spain pick and roll with Nikola Jovic as the ball handler, Ja as the initial screener, and Jaren Jackson as the second screener. Nikola Jovic can come off that screen, and Jaren Jackson can set the Spain screen for Ja's man, and then Ja can cut to the basket with Nikola Jovic heading downhill. Ja's coming downhill, almost kind of like as the rim runner roll. He could throw that lob to Ja with that highlight dunk, or he can have Jaren Jackson behind. Just some creative plays like that. I just came up with that off the top of my head, and that just sounds really fun. Just thinking about it, or even in transition, he's a wizard in transition. Just the delivery of his passes, the types of passes that he can make: one-handed passes, full court passes with either hand, bounce passes in between defenders. And again, the image of Nikola Jovic running a transition with Desmond Bane heading, cutting to one wing, Dylan Brooks, again, insert player heading to the other wing, Jaren Ja running to the rim. Again, you have the alley oop potential, and then you have Jaren Jackson trailing the break, as he's a very good, above the break, top of the key shooter. That would just be must see TV. And I think Nikola Jovic, even though he does have his defensive limits, just his offensive upside and just the creativity that could happen with his team, it would just be must see TV. So I believe that Nikola Jovic is the right pick for the Memphis Grizzlies at 11. Moving on to the 12th pick in the 2022 NBA draft, I have the Washington Wizards selecting G League Ignite guard Jaden Hardy. Now, Jaden Hardy is a prospect that I struggle a lot with before the season started. I think not only me, but a lot of people pretty much in agreement had him locked as a top three prospect in this class. And the main issue with him during this time in the G League is just his consistency issues as a scorer. It's just been very up and down. And I kind of stated before the G League season started, in my initial scouting report of him, that he's going to struggle defensively. I wasn't expecting too much of him defensively. But my main thing with Jaden Hardy was that I really wish that the G League would have put him in positions where his playmaking could improve. And I feel like they have to a certain extent, but I feel like Jaden Harvey, excuse me, has more so, played into his scoring tendencies, and he's just been raw as a scorer. I mean, you see it when you watch him. You see the potential of that three-level score. You see the shooting ability. I feel like the shooting ability is real. It's just a matter of that mid-range game, and the finishing, I think, has shown a lot more upside than the mid-range game. But I feel like both levels have shown a certain level of upside. And I feel like the talent's still there with Jaden Hardy. I'm still a believer in him. And as I stated in my first bullet point, I think that the groundwork of being, a legitimate three-level scorer is still there. And I think the flashes that he has shown as a playmaker are very encouraging. Now, the reason why I believe that he would be a great pick for the Washington Wizards is that I I do believe that not Jaden Hardy, Bradley Beal's days in Washington are numbered. I feel like he's going to be traded sooner rather than later. Even if Tommy Shepard wants to continue to push to become the perennial eighth seed of the Eastern Conference, at some point he's going to have to give, and Bradley Beal's going to be gone. And I feel like Jaden Hardy theoretically could slide into being the team's long term shooting guard, but I feel like with the playmaking playmaking that he has shown not only in high school but also in the flashes that he has shown in the G League. I feel like drafting Jaden Hardy and molding him into being, a more so of a point guard, really playing into his playmaking would help his game wonders for not only being a fit next to Bradley Beal, but being, the team's real offensive focal point once Bradley Beal is no longer a part of the Washington Wizards. And I feel like that's really what Washington could focus on. And I feel like Wes Unseld is a good enough developmental coach to get that out of Jaden Hardy and be patient with him. It's Jaden Hardy's not going to look pretty from day one. He's a long-term project, but I feel like it's a project worth investing in. And if worse comes to worse, and he's an inefficient 18, let's say he's just an 17, 18 point per game scorer, I feel like he could still be, the shooting guard for this team, the day that they decide to trade Bradley Beal. And as I mentioned, the defense is not perfect. This team has deep-rooted defensive issues. I feel like Denny Avdia is a nice piece. Even Kyle Kuzma to a certain extent. Porzingis has seen better days as a rim protector, but I think he's still a solid rim protector. But again, this is just not a great defensive team. But what I really like about Jaden Hardy is just the excitement that he's going to bring to this team. Just the scoring pop that he's going to bring to this team, as Washington is one of the slower teams in the league, and they're one of the worst offenses in the league. So again, I really like Jaden Hardy as, playing him at the point guard position. Go through those growing pains early in his career. He would go through what a Jalen Green is going through, even in Anthony Simons early on in his career. Outside of this year, the first couple of years of Anthony Simons' career, he really struggled, and I feel like Jaden Hardy, having him go through the growing pains and really tapping into that playmaking would only help him in the long run as he gets used to the NBA game. And I feel like for inefficient players like this, tapping into much more of their other strengths as a player will only help them adapt to the NBA game. So for the Washington Wizards, I believe that Jaden Hardy would be a great pick. Moving on to the 13th pick of the 2022 NBA draft, I have the Atlanta Hawks selecting Wisconsin forward Patrick Baldwin, a very raw prospect, decided to play at a lower D1 school, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, for his father, who was the head coach. Wasn't really surrounded by too much talent and was kind of given the green light to take, whatever kind of shot he pleased. His shot selection was pretty poor. And even though he did display, upside as a player who can play on and off the ball, be a 6'9" wing who can create his own shot as well as space the floor for, his teammates at the NBA level. It was a very ugly season for Patrick Baldwin. Not gonna lie, I do believe that he should have gone to a much better college than Milwaukee, Wisconsin. However, I view this pick as much more of a long-term pick for the Atlanta Hawks. I understand the rationale of Travis Schlenk. He was realistically trying to save his job by pushing all his chips in for Atlanta to be a win now team. I don't know how I don't know if I per se would have done that. I understand that your job is on the line and you want to keep your job, but screwing over the Hawks long term. I mean, I guess I'm not in that position, so I really shouldn't speak on that. But I think it's much more beneficial for the Hawks to be competitive when Trae Young is 26, 27 in his clear prime, rather than when he's 23. Right, and I think Pat Baldwin is a long term project for that. I think his role from day one should just be to catch and shoot threes and hustle on defense. That's it. And I do think he's shown flashes of being a very solid point of attack defender. However, he needs a lot of work on that in the floor as well. However, what I really like about Pat Baldwin, what I mentioned in his individual scouting report videos, that I really think that he's a ball of clay, just because he hasn't really played in a very good structure, right? He's playing for his father. Realistically, like it's really just an extension of AAU, right? So I feel like getting him in a professional setting where he's not with his family and with much better competition around him, I feel like that would only elevate Patrick Baldwin. And he's just very raw. And I feel like Atlanta can just mold him whichever way they can. And I feel like he fills a position of need in the wing, given the fact that they did trade Cam Reddish to my New York Knicks. So I feel like he would slide into this team as their long-term four. If he develops, that would give Atlanta a very formidable wing duo of DeAndre Hunter. Knock on wood that he stays healthy, and Patrick Baldwin. And I feel like he could also be used as trade bait, for the Atlanta Hawks. Just given how raw he is, I feel like with players like Pat Baldwin, it's very tricky because he just has so much work to do. It's like, what are the chances that he actually, improves on everything he needs to improve on? So he could very well be used as a trade piece. I could very well see a rebuilding team, trading a more win now player to the Hawks for Pat Baldwin, viewing him in the same way as I just stated. A very moldable 6'9" player with a lot of upside, right? So whether Atlanta wants to keep him on the team and build him and turn Pat Baldwin into whatever kind of player they want to, or they want to use him as trade bait moving forward. And regardless, he would still be a player that would fill a position of need. So at the end of the day, I think Patrick Baldwin is the pick for the Atlanta Hawks at 13. Moving on to the 14th pick of the 2022 NBA draft to round out the lottery, I have the Charlotte Hornets selecting Auburn center Walker Kessler. This might be surprising to some people. I think a lot of people expected Jalen Duren to be the pick here, but simply put, I think Walker Kessler is just a better prospect. We'll talk about Jalen Duren later on when he is picked. However, Walker Kessler, I believe, to be the best rim protector in the nation. I think Chet Holmgren might be the best, rim protecting prospect, but Walker Kessler is without a doubt the best rim protector in the nation. It is timing and discipline when blocking shots is just, it's a thing of beauty. It seems like every time he just puts his hands up, the shot ends up just getting sent back, right? And even if he's not blocking shots, just his presence around the rim is just always felt. It just seems like he's always contesting shots, even when he's not blocking them. It's just such a stout defensive prospect, more so of a drop coverage big. However, I think he does have the ability to cover some guards, more so, forwards, maybe some twos. I'm not too sure about the best of point guards. Like I think like a Trae Young might be able to beat Walker Kessler. He is liable to get beat by some of the shiftier guards. He has been beat by some of the shiftier guards that Auburn has played against. However, just his ability as a rim protector it's just incredible. And even though I do love Kai Jones for the Charlotte Hornets, it's a position of need. And you look across their roster, their point guard position. They have one of the best young point guards, all-star in his second year in LaMelo Ball. They have James Bouknight, lottery pick last year, Terry Rozier at the 2. They have Miles Bridges, Kelly Oubre, PJ Washington at the forward positions, JT Thor, one of my favorite prospects from last year's class. Even though the center position is really the only position that they could draft, realistically, the position that could play from day one and have a realistic impact. And I feel like Walker Kessler would just lock up that position, kind of similar to my New York Knicks, right? Where I stated that, I really like Miles Bridges. I really like our foreign prospect, Rokas Jokubaitis, excuse me. But, getting Ty Washington for the Knicks, you just get that blue chip, player at a position of need. And I feel like very similarly for the Charlotte Hornets, right? Even though you have Kai Jones, you get Walker Kessler, fills a position of need. He would be a starter from day one. They haven't been necessarily bad as a rim protecting team this season. However, I feel like just having such an awesome rim protector like Walker Kessler would just elevate their defense even further. And I feel like it would give, other players like a Miles Bridges, like a LaMelo Ball, more confidence to be more aggressive. I'm not saying like LaMelo Ball is very aggressive out on the perimeter in terms of like deflecting passing lanes and whatnot, but just giving them the confidence of just being able to say, all right, I can gamble a lot more now because I have Walker Kessler behind me to protect the paint if anything happens, right? And they're just overall one of the league's worst defenses, Charlotte, that is. And I feel that just having Walker Kessler there would just give their guys a bit more confidence on the defensive end as a team. However, offensively, he's a very solid offensive player. He's the fourth option for Auburn, definitely behind Jabari Smith, Wendell Green, Katie Johnson. He's pretty solidly their fourth option. But he cleans up pretty much everything around the rim. Given he is about 7'1", I'd say he's a bit closer to 7'2", but 7'1" is what he's listed as. With plus wingspan, obviously, he pretty much finishes everything around the rim. Not a lot of players can even contest his shots around the rim. But he's also, what's very enticing about Walker Kessler is just his ability to shoot. I think he's definitely a very viable pick and pop threat, at the NBA level. His shooting pocket is a bit of a concern. Walker Kessler is actually the first prospect that we've covered that I haven't actually made an individual scouting report for, so I won't go too much in depth to save it for his individual video. But I really like his ability to be a pick and pop threat from at the NBA level. And I think that, just adding that layer, adding that wrinkle into Charlotte's offense, giving them not only one of the arguably probably the best rim protector in this class, but also a player who can, finish pretty much everything around the rim. Being able to operate not only as a rimmer, but a guy who can space the floor in pick and pop situations, and maybe sit out on the corner for players like Miles Bridges, giving a player like Miles Bridges more room to operate around the rim, or LaMelo Ball, or Terry Rozier, or whatnot. So Walker Kessler will not only shore up Charlotte's defense, fill a long-term position, a position of need, be a day-one impact player for them, but would also be a pretty versatile offensive piece. And with the first pick outside of the lottery in the 2022 draft, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder selecting Memphis big man Jalen Duren. Now, I am not that high on Jalen Duren at all. I'm going to be honest. He's a very good athlete, incredible vertical threat, very disciplined and very very effective rim protector. Excuse me. However, I do think that he has a pretty high center of gravity. I do have extreme worries about his ability to defend out on the perimeter. I also have major question marks about his ability to defend in pick and rolls. I feel like a lot of times he's just lost. He doesn't really know whether it doesn't really seem like he knows whether he's in like a drop coverage, or in a switch scheme, or he doesn't really seem to know really what's going on defensively a lot of times, and I feel like he can get beat by better ball handlers. I think Memphis is pretty lucky that he hasn't been put on in a lot of islands, just because they're not necessarily playing top tier D1 competition. But I do have severe concerns with Jalen Duren defensively and also offensively. I think I think the handle is never. It's not there. It's not going to develop. Some people have said, "Oh, he's shown flashes of a mid range jump shot." It's not there. The free throw form is just not there. He doesn't take threes. He's not all that great of a decision maker when pressured. I think he's really just going to be a vertical rim threat and a solid rim protector during his career in the NBA. However, he is 18 years old. He is supposed to be a senior in high school, and he is an incredible athlete. So I guess you could say he has room to grow. But there is just a lot of fundamental issues with Jalen Duren that I am very concerned about. However, he's 18 years old, incredible athlete. Oklahoma City Thunder, needs a center really bad, and I do think he is arguably the best center on the board at this point in the draft. I feel like, again, similar to what I said with AJ Griffin, I feel like at this point, if they do have a starting lineup of Josh Giddey, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, and AJ Griffin, it would kind of be redundant to draft another wing, especially when they have guys whose development they're trying to prioritize, in like Aaron Wiggins or Alexei Pokusevsky, even Jeremiah Robinson Earl. I would think is much more of a power forward. I think he's a bit undersized at the center position. So I think Jalen Duren would come in, and I feel like his strengths would be utilized. OKC is one of the worst rim protecting teams, so I feel like Jalen Duren would help in that aspect. And I feel like he would have to be in drop coverage schemes from day one in the NBA, just because he's just lost in coverage. He's just gonna have to drop. Maybe he can grow, but from day one he's just gonna have to be in drop coverages. But again, he would help OKC in terms of being a rim protector. And I think offensively, he's an incredible vertical threat, but outside of that, he's very limited. But I feel like on this Oklahoma City team with so much offensive talent at this point, they already added AJ Griffin in this mock draft, to Shea and Josh Giddey and Trey Mann. With those three ball handlers, specifically, Giddey, Shea, and Mann, I feel like they'd be able to get Jalen Duren easy lobs, in pick and roll situations. Him and Josh Giddey and Jalen Duren pick and roll would be extremely, exciting to watch. I feel like I feel like him and Shea would have a little bit less chemistry, just because I feel like, Shea works best with the pick and pop threat rather than, a rim runner. I think he could work well with Trey Mann, depending on the steps that Trey Mann takes in year two. I'm very confident in him taking a step. However, we need to see him take that step first. But with Trey Mann's ability to shoot the ball, shoot as a self-creator, I feel like it could work very well with Jalen Duren. But, again, he'd be coming into a team, again, Sam Presti loves his athletes, a young athlete at a dire position of need, fill that long-term hole at the center position. A player who would help them in terms of their rim protection, and then offensively he would be, a finisher around the rim, a very good vertical threat for this young Oklahoma City Thunder team. So with the 15th pick in the draft, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder selecting Jalen Duren with their second pick of the draft.